Sarah Mitchell stood outside the grand entrance of the Riverside Luxury Hotel, one of the crown jewels in her hotel empire. At 34, she had built a reputation as one of the youngest and most successful CEOs in the hospitality industry. But today, she wasn't here as the polished executive featured in business magazines. She wore simple jeans, a plain t-shirt, and carried a worn backpack, dressed like any ordinary traveler. This was intentional. Sarah had received numerous complaints about this particular location over the past 6 months. Rude staff, discriminatory treatment toward certain guests, and a general decline in service quality. She had tried addressing these issues through reports and management meetings, but nothing changed. So she decided to see the truth for herself, unannounced and unrecognized, as she walked through the revolving doors into the opulent lobby with its crystal chandeliers and marble floors. Sarah observed everything with a trained eye. The staff members behind the reception desk were chatting amongst themselves, barely glancing at the guests waiting in line. The first encounter. Sarah joined the queue at the reception desk. Ahead of her stood an elderly couple who seemed confused about their reservation. The receptionist, a young woman named Jessica according to her name tag, rolled her eyes visibly. "Look, if you don't have the confirmation number, I can't help you," Jessica said dismissively. "There are other guests waiting." The elderly man fumbled with his phone, his hands trembling slightly. "I'm sure I have it somewhere. My grandson made the booking." "Sir, please step aside next," Jessica called out, waving her hand impatiently. Sarah felt her jaw tighten but said nothing. She made a mental note as she stepped forward. "Hi, I'd like to check in," Sarah said politely. Jessica looked her up and down, her nose wrinkling slightly at Sarah's casual appearance. "Do you have a reservation?" "Yes, under Sarah Mitchell." Jessica typed lazily on her keyboard, barely looking at the screen. "I don't see anything under that name. Could you check again, please?" "It should be there." With an exaggerated sigh, Jessica typed again. "No, nothing. Maybe you have the wrong hotel?" Sarah knew her reservation was there. She had made it herself just yesterday. "I'm certain it's this hotel. Could you check one more time?" "I already checked twice," Jessica snapped. "Look, we're a luxury establishment. Maybe you should try the motels down the street. They're more affordable." The condescension in her voice was unmistakable. Several other staff members nearby snickered. "Enter the manager." Before Sarah could respond, a tall man in an expensive suit strode over. His name tag read Richard Blake, General Manager. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, but his eyes were on Sarah, assessing her appearance with thinly veiled disdain. "This woman claims to have a reservation, but there's nothing in the system," Jessica explained. Richard turned to Sarah. "Miss, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We can't have people coming in off the street causing disturbances." "I'm not causing a disturbance," Sarah said calmly. "I have a legitimate reservation." "Your type always says that," Richard said with a smirk. "Security!" "My type?" Sarah's voice remained steady, though anger simmered beneath the surface. "Yes, people who clearly can't afford a place like this but want to pretend they can. Now I'll ask you one more time, leave or you'll be escorted out." Sarah stood her ground. "I'm not going anywhere. I'm a paying customer with a reservation." What happened next shocked everyone in the lobby. Richard grabbed Sarah's arm roughly, and when she pulled away, he raised his hand and slapped her across the face. The lobby fell silent. Several guests gasped. Sarah's cheek burned red, but she didn't raise her hand to touch it. Instead, she looked directly into Richard's eyes with an intensity that should have warned him he'd made a catastrophic mistake. "You just made the biggest error of your career," she said quietly. Richard laughed. "Are you threatening me? Get out before I have you arrested for trespassing." The power shift. Sarah reached into her backpack and pulled out her phone. Within seconds, she had made a call. "David, it's Sarah. I'm at the Riverside location. I need you here immediately with the legal team and HR. Yes, now." Richard's confident expression faltered slightly. "Who are you calling?" Sarah didn't answer him. Instead, she turned to address the growing crowd of onlookers. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm the CEO of Mitchell Hospitality Group, which owns this hotel and 43 others across the country. The color drained from Richard's face. Jessica's mouth fell open. The other staff members who had been laughing moments ago suddenly looked terrified. That's impossible, Richard stammered. Sarah Mitchell is. You can't be. Can't be what, young? Dressed casually? Sarah's voice was like ice. Let me guess, you expected someone older in a business suit? That's your first problem. Your second problem is that you just assaulted your boss in front of dozens of witnesses. Richard stumbled backward. I didn't know. If I had known... That's exactly the point, Sarah cut him off. The fact that you treat people differently based on how they look, how much money you think they have, or whether you know who they are, that's the core problem here. She turned to Jessica. When I was standing in line, I watched you dismiss an elderly couple who needed help. What happened to them? Jessica's face was pale. They left. They left because you couldn't be bothered to help them. Sarah pulled out her phone again and began making notes. I've been receiving complaints about this location for months. Discrimination against guests who don't look wealthy enough. Rudeness, poor service. I thought the reports might be exaggerated. Now I see they weren't. Within 10 minutes, 3 black SUVs pulled up outside the hotel. A group of people in business attire strode into the lobby. Sarah's executive team, legal counsel and HR director, David Chen, the company's COO and Sarah's right hand, approached her immediately. His eyes widened when he saw the red mark on her face. Sarah, what happened? Mr. Blake here decided to slap me when I wouldn't leave the hotel where I had a reservation. David's expression hardened as he turned to Richard. You assaulted her? Richard looked like he might faint. I didn't know who she was. That shouldn't matter. David's voice echoed through the lobby. You don't put your hands on anyone regardless of who they are. The investigation. For the next hour, Sarah and her team conducted interviews with staff and guests. The stories that emerged painted a disturbing picture. Multiple guests reported being treated poorly based on their appearance, age, or perceived wealth. Staff members admitted that Richard had created a toxic culture, where looking down on lesser guests was not only accepted but encouraged. One housekeeper, a woman named Maria, tearfully described how she'd been told to prioritize cleaning rooms for guests who looked wealthy while neglecting others. A bellhop mentioned being reprimanded for helping an elderly woman with too many bags because she probably wouldn't tip much anyway. The elderly couple Sarah had seen earlier were located at another hotel. When reached by phone, they confirmed they'd felt humiliated and unwelcome. Sarah stood in the center of the lobby, surrounded by her assembled staff. Her team had set up a makeshift command center, and every employee from the hotel had been called in. I want to make something very clear, Sarah began, her voice carrying authority. This company was built on the principle that every guest deserves respect, dignity, and excellent service, not just the ones who arrive in expensive cars or designer clothes. Everyone. She paused, looking around at the faces before her. Some looked ashamed. Others looked defiant. What I've witnessed today, and what I've learned from our investigation, shows me that this location has completely lost sight of our values. Mr. Blake, you're terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you out, and you'll be hearing from our legal team. Richard opened his mouth to protest, but no words came out. Security officers guided him toward the exit. Jessica, Sarah continued, you're also terminated. Your behavior toward guests has been consistently unacceptable. One by one, Sarah called out names. 15 staff members in total, all guilty of serious misconduct or discrimination. The HR director handed each a termination letter. A new beginning. But Sarah wasn't finished. She turned to the remaining staff members, many of whom looked relieved or nervous. For those of you staying, things are going to change dramatically. Starting tomorrow, every member of this staff will undergo mandatory training on respect, diversity, and customer service. We'll be implementing new policies and oversight to ensure this never happens again. She gestured to Maria, the housekeeper who had spoken up. People like Maria, who tried to maintain our standards despite the toxic culture here, will be recognized and rewarded. Doing the right thing will no longer be discouraged, it will be expected. Sarah's executive team began outlining the changes. A new management structure, regular audits, anonymous reporting systems for staff concerns, and most importantly, a renewed commitment to treating every guest with equal respect. As the meeting concluded and staff members dispersed, David approached Sarah with an ice pack for her face. You should file assault charges against him, he said. Sarah considered this. Have legal send him a letter making it clear that if he ever works in hospitality again, or if he badmouths this company, we will prosecute. But I think losing his career is punishment enough. I want our focus to be on fixing this place, not revenge. The aftermath. In the days that followed, the story of what happened at Riverside Luxury Hotel spread throughout the company. Sarah personally oversaw the hiring of a new general manager, a woman with an impeccable track record of creating inclusive, respectful work environments. The elderly couple was invited back as special guests, given a complimentary weekend stay and treated like royalty. Sarah met with them personally to apologize. 3 months later, the Riverside Hotel had completely transformed. Guest satisfaction scores had skyrocketed. Staff morale was higher than it had been in years. The new culture of respect and excellence was palpable from the moment anyone walked through the doors. Sarah stood in that same lobby, this time in a business suit, watching her staff interact with guests of all kinds, with genuine warmth and professionalism. A young backpacker was being helped with the same attentiveness as a businessman in an expensive suit. An elderly woman was being patiently assisted by a receptionist, who smiled throughout the interaction. This was what she had envisioned when she first started her company. This was what hospitality was supposed to be. Maria, the housekeeper who had spoken up, approached her shyly. Ms. Mitchell, I just wanted to thank you. This place feels different now, better. Thank you for having the courage to tell the truth, Sarah replied. That took real strength. As Maria walked away, David joined Sarah. You could have handled this from the corporate office. You didn't have to subject yourself to that treatment. Sarah touched her cheek, where the mark from Richard's slap had long since faded. Yes, I did. Sometimes you can't solve problems from a distance. Sometimes you need to experience things firsthand to truly understand what needs to change. She looked around the transformed lobby. Besides, this way, every employee in our company knows that I mean what I say. Respect isn't negotiable. Excellence isn't optional, and no one is beneath our concern. The lesson. The story of the Riverside Hotel became legendary within Mitchell Hospitality Group and eventually throughout the industry. It served as a reminder that true leadership sometimes means getting your hands dirty. That character is revealed in how we treat those who can do nothing for us, and that the price of discrimination and disrespect is always too high. Sarah never regretted that day. Despite the humiliation and physical assault she endured, it had given her the evidence and moral authority she needed to make sweeping changes not just at one location, but across her entire company. Years later, when interviewed for a business magazine about her management philosophy, Sarah was asked what advice she'd give to other leaders. Never lose touch with the ground level, she said. And remember that how your organization treats the least important person says everything about your values. In hospitality, in any business really, everyone deserves respect. There are no exceptions. The interviewer asked one final question. Any regrets about that day at the Riverside? Sarah smiled. Only one, that I didn't do it sooner. The end.